Well, good afternoon, everyone. We're going to get started out of respect for your time and for our guest time this morning. Or this afternoon, I guess, 12:02. So thank you so much for carving out some time to join us. We may be a small group, but we are a mighty group of people who are really interested in our topic at hand. Garr and I met this week, and I just think his journey to his leadership journey is fascinating. And as a person who really focuses on leadership, I think you'll find it's an interesting story, as well as a story about business development and innovation and all the intersection between those things, which is always so interesting. So we are the Leadership Institute at Purdue Northwest and Society of Innovators at Purdue Northwest. We focus on both leadership and innovation and the connection between those two areas of study and areas of focus as we develop as in our careers. And I always say we're all works in progress and we learn from one another. So today we're really blessed to have a young entrepreneur who is going to share his story from an econ major in college, thinking he might have to go into finance and something boring like that, to having a career where it sounds like there's so many moving parts and plates in the air that he doesn't have time to be bored at all. So I will pass to my colleague, Dr. Rachel Clapp-Smith, who is the academic director at the Leadership Institute, and she'll just give us a quick snapshot of the Leadership Institute and the work we do, and then we'll pass to Jason for introductions.
Great, thank you, Sheila, and thank you everybody for joining us today. What a timely topic at the end of April. So thank you, Garr, for being here with us. Really important information that we do need to speak about and get on the radar of our leaders. We're so thrilled to have you. The Leadership Institute is an institute within the Purdue University Northwest. I have the good fortune of working with Sheila. I'm the academic director, and Dr. Jane Thomas, who is a faculty member in our College of Business, has also joined us as an assistant academic director. I'm a professor of leadership and do research on how do leaders develop. So what has been fantastic about the work we have been able to do in the Leadership Institute is that we have several programs geared towards different types of leaders and the challenges that they face. Our flagship is Leadership Northwest Indiana. It's been around for decades, but we have completely revamped that program. So if you know someone who did it more than just a couple of years ago, tell them that it's new and improved and a completely different experience if they want to come back and really delve into evidence-based leadership development, where we really take a personalized approach to what does it take for each individual to become their authentic self while leading. What's great is we are actually recruiting for our next round of L&I. So that group will start up. The cohort begins in September, I believe, is when we'll get started. So if you know anyone who's interested, refer them to us. We can help them get lined up to join us in a journey of leadership development that doesn't end with us. It's just the beginning. So with that, I'd like to turn over to Jason, and thank you all for being here.
Yeah, thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Sheila. So yeah, we are excited to speak with Garr this morning. I am the Managing Director of the Society of Innovators here. So we do work closely with the Leadership Institute, as Sheila referenced, and really we're excited starting this month. We're going to be bringing more innovation and hearing from leaders in really innovative companies the next couple of months. Just recognizing that innovation and leadership are really two sides of the same coin. You really can't think about one without the other. And also some context to today specifically, we are recognizing that we just celebrated Earth Week earlier this month. And so this focus on sustainability falls right in line with that. And to tell you a little bit of just what Rheaply is, or who Rheaply is, and Garr's certainly going to share more about that. But Rheaply is a climate tech company based here in Chicago that is catalyzing the circular economy. And we will especially lean on you, Garr, to tell us exactly what that means. But whatever it is, whatever it means, it's working because Rheaply did just recently close out an $8 million round of funding to do the work they are doing. And so specifically, Garr is the Chief Chief of Staff at Rheaply. I think Sheila referenced this, but Garr has a BA in economics. He began his career helping produce programming such as Super Bowl Sunday for the Oprah Winfrey Network. And after his stint as a TV producer in the entertainment industry, he pursued his passion for environmentally financially viable solutions and graduated with a Master of Sustainability Solutions from Arizona State University. And now as Chief of Staff at Rheaply, Garr is leveraging this unique experience in production, sales, and climate tech to assist large academic, government, and Fortune 100 enterprise partners in building technology that empowers zero waste and circular solutions. So Garr, thanks for joining us. And yeah, we look forward to just, first of all, learning more about Rheaply and what it is you guys do.
Well, we can absolutely go through the basics, then we can go through Rheaply. But first, thank you everybody for joining, letting me sort of come and speak to who we are and what circular economy means to us. Jason, quick edit there. I don't know if I heard Super Bowl Sunday, but Super Soul Sunday on the Oprah Winfrey Network is actually the great segue into leadership. That was actually my first journey into frankly, getting into better understanding some of the top leaders of all of our industries. And so it's funny that I kind of always forget that was the key for me. Was I was a young intern and then like a production assistant and then an associate producer working with crafting interview questions for Miss Winfrey herself, but also for her amazing guests like Howard Schultz or I forget his name, Anthony Mackie. No, not Anthony Mackie, but Mackie, I'm forgetting his first name, but the founder of Whole Foods, where John Mackey, which that was my first look at, oh wait, leadership is taking us into sustainability. And how do we do business better by combining both social, environmental, and economic priorities? And so I think that was my first sort of look into, okay, maybe that's the direction I should go, because I just loved focusing on people and loved focusing on the environment just as much as I was sort of taught to focus on the money and taught to focus on the unit economics. So that was a good start in terms of Super Soul Sunday. Well, if it's all right with you all, I'll go kick right into it in terms of what does the circular economy, what is Rheaply, how does that sound, Jason? How does that sound, Sheila? Excellent.
That sounds like a great plan. Yeah, tell them, what is the circular economy?
Yes. So we'll start with the basics. So the basics is we all operate currently in a linear economic model. So in our current model, we are going to, as consumers, as purchasers of our organizations, we go and we buy things that we then use. And once it's then used up or it's sufficiently depreciated in terms of its economic value or its operational value, we send it on its journey. And so we actually send it to its disposition track. Now that might be landfilling it, that might be recycling it. What Rheaply's hoping to do and what circular economy is hoping to do is actually circle that value back into its original purpose, or allow for it to be used by someone else and extending its life cycle. So what's the ultimate point of the circular economy? Well, in a linear model, it's quite extractive on our natural systems. So in a linear model, we're always pulling resources, materials out of the environment, putting it to use in some sort of good, and then throwing it away and burying it back in the ground if it's landfilled, or at best, spending a ton of time and energy turning it back into another commodity and material good to then turn it back into something. But we don't recycle enough. And so that's automatically we're sort of not able to keep up with our own consumption. And so everything in sort of a circular economic model is based on designing out waste, making sure that we can actually create a system that allows nature to regenerate to some degree. So do we, how do we make sure that we're using all of the metals that we have? How are we using all of the sort of rare earth minerals that we have so that we don't have to keep dipping into the earth and pulling more out, causing disruption to natural systems, not only in our own communities in the United States, but also more impactfully, communities outside and abroad. So typically those marginalized countries and nation states that are willing to accept trash because it allows for some sort of economic development, but ultimately greatly impacts their local communities. And so how do we keep it all in our boundaries? How do we make sure that we're utilizing all of that value in those systems? And as I go forward into Rheaply, and later when we're answering questions, I'm happy to take more questions on that, because that's sort of the high level approach to circular economy. So with that, I'll dive into what Rheaply's doing in the circular economy, and share more about that. So welcome to Rheaply. So our whole goal is to design software that allows for our organizational partners to get better visibility into those exact physical assets that may not be fully utilized at one's organization, and therefore are being sent outbound to landfill when maybe it doesn't need to be so. Or in some cases too, even liquidating is not all that beneficial to organizations, because ultimately there might be a colleague down the hallway that maybe wants the chair that you're looking to get rid of. And so Rheaply's goal is to connect those dots and make sure that you're getting the most amount of money possible for the items that you already own. So I'll dive more into that. So on that note, though, there's been a fair amount of research coming out of the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, which is a leading circular economy sort of thought leader, where they did research with all of their corporate partners and enterprise supporters, and found that there's, just north of $500 billion worth of physical assets that just sit in warehouses, storerooms, broom closets, whatever you name it. What's fun about working in this industry is it has a very personal connection to, I'm sure, all of us. We all can think of these items that maybe have been sitting on our desk for some time that we don't use, sitting in some room that we know about that others don't, and that are just sitting there and depreciating in value. And not only could they have value again to your colleagues, but also maybe a local community member. So it might be a local nonprofit, a local school system that could use that monitor that's just sitting around, that could use, you name it, I've seen it go. I've even seen a fair amount of used pencils that somebody snaps up, or used pens, because they actually are looking to get more out of these assets, and actually don't want to go through their normal procurement channels to buy new pens or new sort of pencils. And so they can actually get it from their colleague quickly who just wants it out of their office. So that's really ultimately the goal here, is we are creating that loop, and we're making sure that purchasing decisions can happen where reuse is prioritized. So we're essentially trying to bring, again, more visibility and accessibility to those assets right at the point of use and reuse, but before they enter storage and might just sit around, before they go down a disposition track and actually end up getting turned into sort of wasted value, where they might be put into the ground, put into landfill, without actually pulling and extracting that value out of those resources before that eventual action. And we do this with our flagship product. Our flagship product is our asset exchange manager, and it's a combination of an asset management system, which one might view typically as sort of just an inventory tracking or an asset management where you're tracking the amount of things that you might have in your organization. We combine that with an online marketplace, where what it means is essentially you can track all of these things that might be, if you're a procurement specialist, you're going to better understand where all of the things that you're purchasing actually are ending up in an organization, and better being able to utilize those assets by saying, hey, are you still using that thing? Or can you help save some money and share it with your neighbors? So in that vein, we are absolutely trying to eat spreadsheets. We view spreadsheets as something that does not allow for scalable systems when it comes to reuse. We often, or maybe even we know of people that are that person in the organization, this one individual who maybe knows where all of the things are buried, where everything is in an organization. You turn to that person. Well, that's not a great store of knowledge either for where some of this value might be in an organization. And then we're also trying to boost homegrown systems. And so a homegrown system might be an organization that looks to create a surplus management type site, but ultimately that may not actually be able to scale throughout the organization as much as someone who's dedicated like Rheaply is at making sure that we've got the best experience for our users and we've got the best experience for the admin and faculty that might use our system to actually share value with their colleagues. With that, we're always tracking sort of our key performance indicators, whether that's making sure that we're absolutely scaling as much sharing as possible. And so we take advantage of that in our pricing model, where we don't actually price our offering per user, because we would view that as a barrier for people to share more things, because naturally we're going to try to save costs and we're going to want to cut users. So that's not how we price our offering, but we're always focused on asset discoverability. So how are we empowering the users to either use their mobile phone, use their desktop, whatever it might be in front of them, where we can actually allow them to sort of share value in a decentralized fashion with their colleagues, with the support of potentially upstream support from their managers and other sort of admin and faculty that might be willing to help in the university setting share these assets. And then we track all of these metrics right on the platform transparently for our users. So you could actually go to our metrics page and see how many transactions that you had as an organization, what the value was for those transactions, as well as how much you've actually diverted from landfill in our weight diversion tracking metric. We've actually gone on to include a lot of sort of what our tonnage was from that we've diverted from landfill. But our next step is actually going to be, how do we tie a diversion from landfill to actually carbon emissions? And that's going to be sort of the holy grail for, I think, a lot of advocacy and a lot of pursuing new solutions in this type of industry, where we're focused on our impact. Is the natural sort of thought currency is, what's the carbon equivalency? So what does this mean in terms of carbon impact, and how do we equate reuse to any sort of carbon action? That's what's going to be the next step for us. We're very excited for that. There will be more to come on that. On that note, who are we working with currently? Well, a lot of our organizations come out of higher ed. This is actually kind of an outdated list, which is great because it means I can talk about some other clients. But from a higher ed perspective, that was actually our origin story. And we came out of actually Northwestern, where one of our co-founders had an issue where he was doing his lead research. Dr. Gary Cooper was studying actually a cure for Parkinson's. He had a particularly well-funded laboratory, and in that, he actually was able to share a lot of his research assets, his research equipment, other things in his laboratory with his colleagues that didn't have as much grant funding. And so because when he didn't need something, he could share it with his colleagues, things started to percolate and people started to share. And ultimately, when he left Northwestern, he kept getting emails about people that were looking for things that were in his lab, things that he was working on. And ultimately, that's where the spark came from on why we should start Rheaply, which is a combination of the words research and cheaply, because we wanted to make sure that we could scale the use and reuse of everything that might be at a research organization. But as you can see, we've actually started to extend that into other areas and other verticals for us, because we found that waste is not primarily just associated with universities. There's waste associated with any type of large buying organization. So whether that's manufacturing, tech, or even government, I think we can think of government organizations that might be maybe not using or reusing things as much as they should be. And we're here to help try to figure out what the new process is for reuse at any one of these verticals. I just put in some use cases. I'm happy to talk about these too when we sort of get to ask more questions and have a conversation. But just kind of highlighting really what we're able to do when we go into an organization and help them get better visibility on these assets. And once we can start to connect the dots, not only between the use of something, but then also colleagues, that's where the value is created. Is we don't have to spend as much, and we don't have to actually spend as much on procurement, and nor do we have to spend money on disposition, because that's the thing that people forget, is it actually costs money to get rid of something. You have to pay waste companies extra money to get rid of something, to account for tipping fees or to account for the services associated with moving certain items. And so we're all about sort of saving money through both ends of that system. That's my information. That's actually my colleagues' information as well. And we work together on just doing some of these events, talking to people, learning more about what they're sort of interested in circular economy. And so feel free, take this down. I'm happy to share this slide. Or if you want to reach out to after this, we can actually talk on LinkedIn as well. Jason, I'm all yours.
Yeah, thank you, Garr. No, that was a great overview. And yeah, if you have any questions specifically about the Rheaply platform and kind of the hows and whys of Rheaply, feel free to share those in the chat, and we'll be happy to either address that or help connect you with that information. But I guess we're really fascinated. Obviously, you built this company, so again, thanks for explaining what Rheaply is and how it works. But I'm really just fascinated on the leadership aspects, right? Is why we're
Yes,
here today.
exactly.
Really, the first one that stands out to me, we heard your background. You started out as a TV producer for the Oprah Winfrey Show, and you shared your story that you've been with the company about 2 years ago. It basically starts out as a TV producer and a neuroscientist walk into a bar, more or less.
Yeah, exactly. Yes.
Tell us a little bit about, you and co-founder Gary Cooper, as you mentioned, have kind of less traditional backgrounds in environment and technology, but talk about how that's really been a benefit, and maybe as you've shaped your team, just bringing that diversity of backgrounds to the table.
I have so greatly enjoyed being in kind of the sustainability industry as a whole. I find that it's so inclusive. It's so focused on diversity of thought and diversity of background. And so as I get more and more involved in the industry, I find that that's kind of the norm, which is really cool, where you'll actually get, because of the way that sustainability is focused, where it's pulling on all different backgrounds from social priority, economic priority, or even environmental, that you're just finding people are slotting into these different positions or leadership roles in these companies that otherwise may not have been filled, mostly because it's a newer priority. Even though it's, I think the priorities have been there for 30, 40, even 50 years to some extent, now companies are getting on board. And I think that has a lot to do with consumer action. I think it has a lot to do with, frankly, legislative action that might be on the horizon that has companies sort of getting in the mode for figuring out some issues now. But what that means is you have a lot of people on our team that are coming with various backgrounds. So Gary's background, yes, very much research focused, very much focused on sort of solving problems when it comes to Parkinson's. My background, some of our other co-founders, and then really the rest of our leadership team is all focused around problem solving. And I think that's been the coolest part, is it doesn't matter where sort of your background is a little bit. People are gravitating towards our team because they're like, okay, this seems complicated. I like that. This seems like it's going to be an interesting space that is always going to be challenging. And it's all about, too, the people that we're meeting along the way. And so I think that's been a lot of fun, is really any person that we're working with at a higher ed organization, at a certain enterprise, whether it's manufacturing or tech, they're specifically geared towards solving the problem. And that actually bleeds into our sales pitch almost as well. And so what's really cool about how sort of leadership is being structured in the sustainability space is we're not selling snake oil. We're not trying to create solutions that are looking for problems. We're trying to solve something. And I think a lot of our stakeholders that are sort of leaders at the organizations that we're working with recognize that. And so there's definitely that energy of, Rheaply may or may not be the solution for someone. And we're not going to try to fit in a scenario where we're not the solution. But there's a high amount of collaboration. There's a high amount of leadership from a lot of these organizations where they're sort of taking that first step into how do we solve that problem? And it's all about sort of that collaborative effort.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. And yeah, as you're starting to attract more, folks to the company, I appreciate, just that description that you're right. I mean, people are, the desire to come work, to have that impact for companies like Rheaply, but you have been attracting a lot of talent. And I think in just 2 short years, you've gone from just 4 employees to now, north of 30. And obviously, as funding is coming in, expectations for growth are continuing to come in. So talk a little bit about that, because there's certainly some unique leadership challenges around, just call it rapid growth and, maintaining that culture. And would just be interested to hear your perspective on that, having a front row seat the last 2 years.
Yeah, with unsurprisingly to everyone probably on the call, that this is the biggest challenge that most startups face as is. So really focused on how do we as an organization not only scale to meet the needs of our company, but also scale to meet the needs of the problem again. And so part of what I would love to reflect on a little bit is, what's funny is we're trying to meet a problem by scaling essentially unsustainably. We're expected to be in that sort of high growth mode that is difficult and stretches the boundaries both of what I think our team has the capacity for, but also what is sort of expectations of normal growth, even in a natural system. And so what's been really fun is, and we just got out of, we've been interviewing like crazy for the past, 2 months now. And it's all about, I think from a leadership perspective, we care most about who our people are. So we care most about not only, can they do what we are looking for in a company? For sure. I think we're finding a lot of talent, but like finding out, are they leaders not just on the team where anybody would be able to step up and sort of grab hold of a situation and sort of lead the team, but they need to be leaders now in the market. And so that's really what we're looking for, those highly personable types of leaders individually who can go into an organization and inspire change and ultimately de-risk change for a lot of our partners. And so that's what it's coming down to, is who on Rheaply can we put into a scenario where they're dealing with a partner, dealing with a client, and how can we use sort of that leadership to actually de-risk it for the client? Because some of these clients are sticking their neck out to solve these problems. And we want to be right there, making sure that we're always there to help, but then also make sure that they know that we're kind of holding everybody's hand along the way as we sort of go towards this solution.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that. And if you could, share just a bit from your personal perspective. It's safe to say that your role as one of 4 looks a lot different from your role as one of 30.
Yes.
So just, personally kind of that, leadership and now management probably of some folks. So let's talk about your journey here within Rheaply.
Yeah, that's been incredibly, I think, I don't know. I'm so grateful that I've been able to reflect on it and still be very conscious of the fact that what is being expected of our growth is really driving a lot of the capacity challenges for myself and sort of for the other leadership. And so in that vein, what has been great, and so from a chief of staff role, it was a title that I was given to really just help support the CEO. So ultimately, I was there to just be his support. And then we've ultimately sort of bifurcated in roles where I'm leading a lot of our team growth. I'm leading a lot of sort of our R&D work and our sort of expansion into the marketplace. But ultimately, to answer your question, the greatest success that we've had with bringing on team members is, if there's one thing I've been able to do well, it's spin up a team that can function enough on its own, and then we bring in an amazing professional who can then take it and let it fly. And so that's been great, where it's like it's been such an exercise in really kind of, I hate to use this in this terms, but like creating a baby and then being like, all right, I've put all this hard work into it, but I'm hiring people I can trust. I'm hiring people that come in and that we don't even hire just by one person. We've got an entire committee who's based on, can I work with this person? Do we trust them? Can they sort of take us to the next level? And I think when we're always reflecting on, what does this mean from a company culture perspective? And so on that level, it's all about trust, where it's like, all right, you're going to be taking this on and you're going to be sort of owning this now. So we need to be able to trust them, because then I want to be able to trust who they hire and who maybe their committees hire. And so that's been a lot of fun to always keep reflecting on, who are we bringing on? Could they be, I'm not saying this has to be a requirement, but like, could they be my best friend? Like, that's kind of a simple, like, would I want to spend time with them outside of the company? And I can say that hands down for everybody at Rheaply. Now, that may not always be the case. And so as we continue to scale out of 30 people into 50 and 70 and 100, that 100 mark is going to be very different. And I think that it will be very interesting to come back and maybe even reflect with you all on sort of where we've gone from 30 to 100. But I hope to say that any people that I meet in the future that maybe I don't know directly on Team Rheaply, that we'll be able to hang out and just be able to really work together, collaborate well together. But hopefully that's based on sort of this lineage of trust that we have in developing out our team.
Okay, yeah, thanks for that. Actually reminds me, the late Tony Shea at Zappos. He always talked about his beer test that, for new
Oh,
hires,
funny.
at
Yeah,
least
of
one
course.
was, hey, if I have a beer with someone and I feel like I want to have another beer with them, they're probably a good fit to work
Yeah, they're a
alongside.
good human. I mean, that's the good mark right there. Yeah.
Yeah, so thank you for that. One, we have quite a few questions filling up the
Excellent.
chat. One, I think, to kind of keep with the culture discussion a little bit, we have a question here, looking at higher ed, but really, I guess, as you're looking at the companies and the clients you work with, I mean, clearly the sustainable model, the culture, the passion that your team shares, right? You're attracting those folks. So
Yes.
it's probably fair to say when you're reaching out to a larger client, there may be that one person, that small team within an organization that gets it, right? But then they have to
Yes.
develop that culture with, across their organization to sell it. So how do you work with, this was specifically higher ed, but how do you work with your organizations to help create a more sustainable model within their culture?
So what is funny about that from our perspective is you're exactly right. We're often dealing with uh, sustainability champions. We're dealing with people who kind of understand our message. So that can very often be our first foot in the door. Now, what is not the case, and this is almost ubiquitous across any industry, is sustainability as a department or as an operational function still doesn't have the buying power needed for program change. So ultimately, they can't really purchase Rheaply. So we often find ourselves going right to finance, operations, sometimes facilities management, even sort of from a surplus function, we'll go to a surplus team. And so that's right off the bat, we're already talking to 6 stakeholders about what Rheaply means to an organizational's operations. Say we get in the door there and we're the advocate of change and we're really guiding everyone through the message on not only why this is better from an impact perspective, but why this helps sort of from a direct ROI and savings perspective. Say we get in the door, we're green lit, we've got a great successful launch over 3 months. We do our 30, 60, 90-day check-ins, and everything's going well. We're still needing to go from that B2B sell to a B2C sell. And so we're going from selling directly to the business where now we sell and we have to, in order to get success, we have to sell directly to the users at that organization. And so as a SaaS platform, companies are already paying us a monthly fee to use our services, but we're going to be first on the chopping block if they don't see user success. And if they don't see user adoption, then it really doesn't really help us at the organizational level. And so that's ultimately what most of our marketing is focused on, is not only using the marketing to gain additional sort of inbound opportunities from the market, but also use that and spin that into how are we directly engaging with the users to make sure they understand, frankly, just who Rheaply is, let alone sustainability or let alone circular economy. Those are sort of messages that come next. But our whole goal is really just saying, hey, this is who we are, and we can help save you money. And then if they ask more questions, hopefully we've got the content right there that allows them to satisfy some of those questions.
Yeah, perfect. Thanks. And a little bit more specifically then about your engagements with these organizations.
Yes.
Another question is looking at kind of the gains and collaborations seen within organizations. So I guess, is it mostly that internal, connecting, or, the internal tearing down of silos, right? If you're talking about say a higher ed institution across all the departments, and do you facilitate cross-organization collaboration? So I guess looking at internal silos versus external silos, really, when it comes to, how you're working with clients.
Yeah. So that's really, so the way our team is structured out is we're really focusing on, we've got our net new sellers. So we've got the people going out into the market, bringing in those new opportunities. Once it gets to that point though, where we're really engaging with that sell, we've actually maybe even executed on the sell. It really comes down to not only our account managers, but our customer success managers. And so that's where, again, when we're dealing with breaking down departmental silos, the account manager's job is really just to say, hey, look at the success that we've had in this particular department. Would you like to be a part of that success? And so it is kind of a manual effort while we still figure out the sort of automated messaging of it all. It's more of a manual effort for us to knock on doors, digitally, of course, right now, but try to get more and more involved with the organization. And that's a challenge always. We still get pushback when people, it's surprising when people don't believe that we're like working with the organization, and they're like, this isn't possible, this is against the rules. And it's like, not against the rules. We've actually figured out a solution. We're working with the organization. So there's always friction, there's always barriers, but we're just there to communicate value. So internally, that will always be a challenge. We hope to continue to iron out that messaging, make it easier and easier for more departments to sign up, see the value, and be able to exchange with colleagues. What actually does help, though, are the external barriers and silos. And so part of our value pitch is, hey, not only could you potentially save money by sharing things internally with colleagues, but also we're going to connect you to your community. And it's that community play that becomes more important for a lot of stakeholders, because they're always looking back on, and even from the organizational perspective, how to give back to the local community. So from our perspective, we can help, if we can't sell or trade or whatever, engage in any type of activity that is transmitting value from organization to organization internally, we can make sure that that sort of transfers those boundaries externally. So that might be, again, moving those tables and chairs or laptops or whatever it is, IT peripherals, moving that to the nonprofits, the school systems, local small businesses. There's very much a desire for that, not only to maybe save money because you might be able to sell to those organizations, but through our system, you can actually track your donation process in a much more efficient way than just kind of catch as catch can, where it's like, oh yeah, we're going to do that here. We're donating to this small nonprofit, or there on the other side of town. And so we're able to track that through our system, which really allows for much more community connection focus when things leave a large organization.
Yeah, thanks for explaining a little more how that works. And also related to that, you're talking a little bit about just the funding, or how this is all monetized on your end. I mean, is this a subscription, or are you paying per placement? How does everything work?
Yes. So part of our unique value offering and prop in this is that this is a SaaS platform. So it's a software as a service model where an organization purchases our offering for a monthly licensing fee. And then our services are directly geared towards making sure that that's the most successful platform as possible by maintaining all of those metrics, getting more and more users, and then moving that value across the organization. What we also are going to be launching is our transactions model. So when we actually see that there's movement on the SaaS, sort of a SaaS supported model, we also are allowing organizations to, again, exchange with our external marketplace. So we're facilitating the connections that maybe, I'm trying to think, I wish I knew the geography of Purdue Northwest, but a local school that might be down the road, we actually allow Purdue Northwest to sell to another local school. So you could sell to a community college, you could sell to another university in the neighborhood, and through that, we'll take a transaction fee. And so we'll allow and facilitate that payment, but obviously take a little bit so that we can scale our own systems and keep scaling the community impact from that as well.
Great. Thank you, Garr. I want to leave some room. We have a few more, more specific questions in the chat, but also just wanted to leave some room here at the end to open this up. So I guess if anyone wants to raise up, one of those more specific questions about the platform to be able to provide a little more context to that question, please feel free to do so. Or again, the floor is open for some questions here for Garr.
Could I address Earl Miller's question?
Yes, please go ahead.
So the breakdown, that's a really interesting question of the breakdown of segments. Without a doubt on our universities, well, I say without a doubt, on our university setting, in our university value prop, university research labs are absolutely probably our strongest use case. That's mostly because these are very high value assets, and we can actually see a very strong sort of transfer of value between departments or between schools on the campus. So what we are seeing though is and I'll say what we're seeing and what we're getting to is we're seeing more and more, again, I call it infrastructure. So again, that's the fixtures, that's the desks, the chairs, whatever it might be. But a lot of what we can also add value to is any type of added stock or surplus. that's entirely different than reuse. So added stock, or in some cases surplus, it just depends what it's called at the organization, might be leftover materials from a recent renovation, might be leftover materials from some sort of recent effort, and they're just sitting around. And so these are actually items that are brand new, sitting in their original packaging, but don't have any use because no one knows that they're actually there, or they're waiting for some sort of departmental reason to use it, when actually maybe a department, again, across campus might actually need those flooring tiles, might need the ceiling tiles to replace other types of ceiling tiles. So added stock is definitely a benefit. And then we're also getting more and more pressure, and we'll take on that pressure because we have to figure it out, from student life. And so student life is definitely that that's going to be newer and harder, because I don't mean to speak disparagingly about students. I used to be one, obviously, we all did. We complicate things. We don't operate as efficiently as admin or faculty as students. So there are always challenges that are going to be in student life. But what we've seen are successes around move in and move outs on the university setting, where those are two particular times in a university's semester that the impact goes through the roof, because students just want to get rid of something fast. They want to act fast and throw it away, where we actually can act as almost an asset bank and allow things to be stored in a location on the university to then be sold back to or donated back to students who would be arriving on the next on campus the next semester. And so we're seeing more about that in a really interesting sort of use case. We're working with Yale on this, where Yale actually wants those types of resources to be recovered for potentially marginalized or economically sort of disenfranchised students that are joining. And so they can actually have these perfectly good assets. That might be full bed frames. It might be refrigerators. It might be all of these things that, don't cost a whole lot to some, but those $100 can add up, and you could furnish an entire dorm apartment just through reuse. And so that's what we're really seeing on the university setting as well. That was a long answer to that, Earl, but hopefully you got some stuff out of that.
Great, thanks, Garr.
Yes.
Yeah, another specific one here comes from David. Well, I guess get back to the platform a little bit. I think earlier when you were telling us more about Rheaply, you talked about some of the analytics that you're providing. Talking about the tonnage, and you're moving towards carbon emission. So David's question, was, is this platform easily integrated? We went away, but with some of these other maybe standards that organizations are having to meet, as far as, again, at the state level, at the country level, how, are you working with any of those different standards when it comes to the data?
The different standards, not yet. CDP, I would like to probably work with closely the most. I happen to know a couple of their leadership because they came out of Arizona State. So I would love to work with them at some point. I think that's going to be really important for standardizing, obviously, our carbon sort of footprint metrics. We will be working more and more around that sort of carbon equivalency this year. That's going to be coming out of some great research supported by some fantastic organizations that we're going to announce in the coming weeks. But with that, I think we're going to need to kind of pick a lane on maybe some sort of standardized metrics and disclosure. So we're going to be figuring that out. Very open to any of those, actually. But I don't have an answer on. We're not working currently with any one of those. What I did pull up, Jason, because I want to make sure everybody see this, because I forgot to do this part, is actually the platform itself, so that people can get a better understanding of what it looks like. With a thumbs up, Jason, I'll continue in to make sure you see it. Perfect. So this is what Rheaply looks like. And so we've actually got, it's fairly intuitive user experience. It might look like some marketplace functionality that you've seen before. The design principle is pretty much, really focused on getting exposure to these assets. So having a natural sense of what's on the platform, and then being able to sort of click on these assets and then make offers on them. And so you can actually go to listings and sort through all of the listings that might be available in your community. We can actually restrict it via certain locations. We can sort of talk about price or even categories, or you can even search. And I could say, I'm looking for a chair at my organization. And if I put in chair, I'm going to get the different chairs that might pop up, or sort of related postings that might pop up to those offerings. And so I could actually go ahead and make an offer on this fabric chair. What you'll get then is just like a standard point of sale, where I'm looking to do a pickup. I can add a message. I can even submit an offer to this individual user, and therefore go and walk over to my colleague who maybe I've never met again, but she might be on the other edge of campus saying, oh, here's this chair. And then you can actually engage in the transfer of that property. What we then do is also, in order to facilitate that, we allow messaging on the platform, where we can actually talk to individual users. From an admin functionality, you can track all of the listings. So really what this means is, if I'm a surplus manager, I now can see everything that's in my stock, and I can actually see, all right, is something moving? Is it actually moving back into my organization? Or can I actually select it and start to sell it outward to an organization of my choosing? So whether that's a specific set of nonprofits, small businesses, local vendors that I'm selling to, you can actually liquidate using that. And then here's the metrics section. So we focus on tracking the metrics over various periods of time, value identified and recaptured as well, and then the weight identified. One of the things I didn't talk about that is kind of how we're thinking about engaging specific departments. So it kind of goes to a question that we had earlier, is this top categories functionality, where everything on the platform gets categorized. Right now, it's being categorized by users, either individually or from a bulk upload perspective. But what we're looking to do is actually tap into upstream systems. And so as enterprise level functionality, we're actually looking at how do we connect with ERP systems, where we can actually get better information and data flow around certain items when they're purchased new, so that when they're ready to be reused, we've got all that information sitting there ready for that sort of purchasing decision. And so in this way, this is where top categorized or top items can be categorized, where you might say, okay, 1 year ago, decor was really, really getting going. We had a lot moving in that section. Lab equipment was second, but in 6 months, it looks like some of these have changed, where lab equipment's still performing, but might be underperforming in the 6 months. And so this is a way where we can start to target specific categories of assets, where you can say, oh, I actually know that we've got a lot of construction going on. And we can actually target construction more specifically by going to a specific department. And so that's sort of something that we're offering from this perspective. And then we've just got our user settings here, where we can track all of our users. We can not only do that, we can put users into teams so that they can optimize their sharing with specific departments. And so that's really just some of the high level functionality I wanted to show through there. So hopefully that answered also some questions on how does this work?
Yeah, thank you for that. Hey, I did want to recognize, so we are at 50, 10 till 1, and we did have this scheduled for 45 minutes today. So appreciate everyone. If you do have to jump off, and we did want to recognize that we did have that scheduled. And Garr, if you're okay, maybe just a couple more minutes of overtime now.
Yeah, I'm happy to.
As we close out. But I guess as we do, and thank you for getting back into the nuts and bolts of Rheaply. That was very helpful. But I guess, right, I mean, it's safe to say that we did attract a group maybe similar to how you're building your team, right? A lot of these are leaders here within P&W and in the community that are sustainability minded. Yes. But we all are leaders in our own right and have teams we're working with. I guess, what advice do you have, and maybe from some of your experience with some of your clients, even of, okay, you've got this leader over here that it cares about sustainability, and they're the ones trying to champion that at their organization. Yes, this is an actual platform and a tool we might use looking at Rheaply, but just overall, right, starting that culture. I guess, how do you help advise leaders to kind of share that story and get folks on the sustainability train with them?
Yeah, that's a great question. And I think what it comes down to, and I kind of mentioned it before, and so it's hopefully not too much of a repeat here, but our job is to de-risk that action. So ultimately, that's really what I think the leadership that maybe we all report to, the CEOs, the provosts, whatever it might be, that they're looking for change, but we're still at the point where we're looking for change within the scope and boundary of cost, within certain sort of, I hate using this word, but realities of sort of our situation. And I think ultimately that is all of our jobs in sustainability, is to continue to be advocates, to continue to lead that aspect from saying, hey, this isn't about what it might cost right now. What it costs what it might cost right now is just the reality of preventing future increasing costs as more action does not take place. And so from our perspective and from Team Rheaply's perspective, that means that we create very personal relationships with the people that we're working with to scale these reuse systems. And so I guess ultimately, just to round this all out with leadership, it's been really interesting that no matter through all of this, it's been led by relationships and cultivating those relationships, being the people in the room that people just want to talk to. We're not here to be difficult. We're not here to cast blame. This is just the reality of the systems that we've all inherited. And ultimately, we're just trying to look for a little bit of the right amount of change to shift 1 degree towards a new path. And so ultimately, I think that just comes from maintaining not only the relationships, but ultimately with our colleagues and internal to a lot of our partners. We operate so much on the goodwill that all of them have with one another. And so I think that's really interesting, where if people get pulled into meetings, they're getting pulled in because they trust, I guess it comes back to trust. They trust that person that pulled them into the meeting when it really wasn't known why their department needs to be involved. And ultimately, Rheaply just needs to be right there. The other stakeholder, the other champion needs to be like, hey, I know this might be out of left field. This is a solid idea. Maybe we should try this. Would you be interested in collaborating? And then that's where hopefully the magic happens.
So Jason, I just have to jump in because Garr just gave a total commercial for authentic leadership. I'm so glad we have this recorded because he used a lot of the key words as a person who focuses, and my career is focused on leadership, using words like trust and communication and human, being a real human. You said that a few times. Yes. It's operating on goodwill. You know, there's a lot of the folks that are on this call and people that we work with and when we're working with them on their leadership development, we really talk about how leading with your heart is so important, no matter how big the challenge is, whether it's a finance challenge, a logistics challenge, a behavior management challenge, all of the things that people who are managers may not be leaders, they're managing tasks and things. But to be a leader, you're really, you're building that trust, you're building the culture, you're building something that people can believe in. Everyone wants to be part of that if it's if it feels positive. And it's so much nicer to build a company where you're basing it on the humanity that we share and the worries and the concerns that connect us all. So I just want to give you a shout out. That's what you said really makes me realize there is a bright future in America.
we're all trying. Yeah, that's so
great.
Thank you for
really
thank
good
you
to hear that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks, Sheila. And Garr, thank you so much. So yeah, I want to recognize we are at our time, but really appreciate you sharing more about Rheaply and especially just your perspective from your seat in leadership. I think just a fascinating, company story as you continue to navigate, right? You're at 30 now and, I think you're still rapidly growing. So still very much a work in progress, but we appreciate you taking time out of your week and sharing about that. And certainly we look forward now to knowing more about a company here in our backyard and following along.
Well, we've got enough people left over that I can say thank you, Earl, Deborah, David, Mary, Kate, Jason, James, Lori, and James. Thank you for sticking around. Thank you for all the questions. So I look forward to whenever the next one might pop up, and hopefully getting somewhere in your neck of the woods as we move into Indiana when we can start crossing these borders, and maybe I can stop by and say hi.
That sounds great. Thanks.
Yeah, perfect.
Awesome, y'all. Thank you so much.
Thank you, everyone, for taking time out to learn a little bit from one of our leadership colleagues. Thank you.
Thanks, y'all.
Bye.